Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
Just get out and do something, and I love that we can show that off and get that experience for people. I'm hoping that Wild Driftless is that for a lot of people, and maybe it's a box they didn't even know they needed to check until they check it.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
Welcome to episode 128 of The Dark Zone. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Today we are delighted to bring Frank Johnson of the Wild Driftless Adventure Race to the show. A longtime racer and first-time race director, we are happy to give time and attention to his efforts to bring a race to that part of the country. Listeners may have noted that we've run an ad in support of Frank's race for the last several episodes. That was run for free, no charge to Frank. We just wanted to support his race. We wanted him to get off the ground and be successful. We know that smaller races, first-time race directors, are the lifeblood of the sport. We know that sometimes the bigger races get our time and attention, but we don't want to forget the grassroots efforts on behalf of all the adventure racers and the community. So we are very, very happy to bring Frank to you today. It's a great interview. He loves the sport. He loves what it does for him, and he's excited to bring it to the rest of the world. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of The Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. And remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Imagine a world where young women in Afghanistan and Pakistan rise above societal constraints, embracing their strength and potential. Ascend Athletics is making this vision a reality. Through mountaineering-based leadership training, Ascend empowers girls and women aged 15 to 24 to become courageous leaders in their communities. By conquering physical summits, these young women build self-esteem and develop skills that last a lifetime. Operating since 2015 in Afghanistan, expanding to Pakistan in 2023, Ascend focuses on regions where gender inequality is most pronounced, providing tools for girls and women to lead empowered lives. Join the Dark Zone in supporting these brave young women as they climb towards a brighter future. Visit ascendathletics.org to learn more about and contribute to this transformative mission. And remember, Ascend pays nothing for the spot. We love the work that they do, and the Dark Zone is happy to support it. Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Anybody who listens to the Dark Zone knows that we love racing of all sorts, right? And our internal bias, sometimes we go to the big races, right? The 5 to 10 day treks across these massive landscapes where teams go out there and they get clobbered and they have bins and they have all sorts of craziness. And we always want to push to bring a spotlight and attention to newer racers and racers that are helpful for beginners, but still strong for seasoned adventure racers. And in our research and in our talking with the community, we came across a new race called the Wild Driftless, which is being held in Iowa. And we have the race director, Frank Johnson, on the show today to talk a bit about the race and his motivation for doing it and what he wants to accomplish. Frank, welcome to the Dark Zone. Tell us all about the Wild Driftless.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. This is, I definitely feel a bit like I am, my imposter syndrome is going full steam here with some of the folks you've had on the podcast previously.
Oh, you too? It's not just me? You also? Okay.
Yeah, right. That's, Yep. I am, like I said, my name's Frank Johnson. I'm Iowa camp director in Iowa, and I have been into adventure racing for about a decade now on a low key kind of way, not doing the big long races, but more of the single day, always a single day race, and the kind of race typically like the Wild Driftless, which is going to be a 9-hour and a 4-hour version. That kind of race where you begin at the beginning of the day, end at the end of the day, and have a party. That's been my adventure racing experience. So that's what we're looking to bring to the Driftless region of Iowa for the first time.
So tell us a bit about the Driftless region of Iowa. And the reason I bring it up is that, you know, if you watch Field of Dreams, and those of you listen to them and try work the line in there, from Does This Heaven Know It's Iowa? The perception of Iowa from many people who aren't from Iowa is that it's primarily cornfields, it's flat. And so at first blush, you hear Iowa, you're not thinking Colorado, you're not thinking New England, you're thinking Iowa. But I did some research on the race, and it appears to be a pretty dynamic, complex region. Tell us a bit about the terrain.
Yeah. This is I'm not originally from Northeast Iowa. I'm originally from Minneapolis, and when I first came down Highway 52, when I was interviewing for the position as a camp director down here, I was driving down 52, and I'd heard of Decorah, Iowa before, and my parents almost retired there. They said it's just gorgeous, and the cognitive dissonance of gorgeous in Iowa was definitely high for me. It was not a thing that resonated. And driving down 52, you suddenly I was familiar with the Driftless area in Minnesota. So the Driftless area is this region of southeast Minnesota, northeast Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin, and extreme northwestern Illinois. And it's called Driftless because it's the area that the glaciers missed. And so there was no glacial drift, or little to no glacial drift. And so you have this landscape that has a lot of exposed rock. Probably the most dynamic feature of the landscape is how many springs there are. It's this limestone karst topography. And so it's a trout fishing heaven, which, again, Iowa, not what people think necessarily. But this is, I would say that people's impression of Iowa, for the most part, is very true. It's just that we're the exception to the rule up here in the far northeastern corner. And it's not just hills. That's the thing. It's hills with character. There's a lot of rocky eminence. There's a lot of really kind of cool riffly rivers through this area. Paddling is awesome through here. There's a good little mountain biking culture, and there's a really strong gravel cycling culture through here that permeate this region with its just really beautiful vistas. And there's also some surprising things like rock climbing and all of that you would just wouldn't in Iowa, I wouldn't expect it. And it's probably much more something that people would associate with Southwest Wisconsin. And so if you're familiar with that region, that's essentially what we have here, with a little tweak and a little different character.
So, and it's fascinating, right? You mentioned the idea that the typical perception of Iowa holds, right? Cornfields and farms and field of dreams and all of that. But it appears that there's this interesting topographical, geological section of those four states you mentioned, where those states, they come together. So if someone were to come out, were to do the race, and talk about navigation for a second, right? Years ago, the Nationals were held out and towards Midwest. And one thing that a lot of the racers commented on is that what they lacked in their navigation were big features, right? Which you tend to see in a lot of races, like you're looking to your northwest and you see a hilltop, or you see a mountain of some sort, or you see a stream or a river. From a navigational perspective, where would you put the challenge in terms of how will navigators be able to move around the course? What will that look like for them?
Yeah, so while we are similar to Wisconsin, I think where Nationals was in particular, a lot of those races, whether it's Stubborn Mule or whether it's Rib Mountain or any of those bigger races, a lot of them are in that kind of kettle moraine territory where you have those canes and kettles. And so you're dealing with a lot of minor terrain features, depressions and small hills and that kind of thing, which is it's hard to navigate in, especially because the forest through there is quite dense. And I think people found that to be true. We are subtly different than that. We don't have the canes and kettles feature. We have this limestone escarpment kind of feature that is much more. There's a lot more reentrance. There's a lot more spurs and reentrance, and a lot more kind of sharp, dramatic feature. And also, our forests tend to be very. I think they're beautiful. They're very runnable in a lot of places because it's a lot of hardwood, old growth kind of forest. So navigation in that respect is maybe a little easier because even though you don't have the giant mountains and the major features, there's a ton of things to use as context clues. There's a lot of catching features. There's a lot of handrails. I mean, so many rivers, so many streams, and then what I found is the hard part of navigating around here is getting that kind of a small scale, finding the feature on the feature, because there's a lot of parallels out there, a lot of similar reentrants that kind of run parallel to one another, or a lot of spurs where especially the rocky areas are kind of difficult to assess where you are on a ridge line. And I think people talk about ridge lines in Iowa. I mean, we're not talking about like 1,000-foot eminences, but the thing about the region is we have this plateau that's essentially at 1,200 feet of elevation, and all of these little springs and rivers have carved through it, and they're all at like 1,900, 800 feet of elevation. So you have endless 200, 300-foot hills. And I'd say navigation-wise, it's a probably easy to moderate kind of area, but it might have some little wrinkles in it that even get some people, some confident navigators, a little turned around.
Yeah, I have visions of people who are used to navigating in much larger features and standing on we could be here, or we could be here, right? Because the way that you describe it is it requires that micro navigation where there's nothing really big to work off of, but because it sounds like it's very runnable and it's very accessible, that you could very quickly eliminate the different spots where you are. Wrong reentrant, jump to the next one, jump to the next one. You went with, this is the first year we're doing the race, right? And we're delighted to always put a spotlight on a first-time race director and a first-time race. You go with a 4-hour version and a 9-hour version. Why did you choose those two distances?
So it partly has to do with the area we're going to be in for the first year of this race. 9 hours seemed like about the right distance to be able to show off the full area around the host site, which is going to be Camp Iwalu, which is the camp where I work at. And then a 4 hours seemed to work as a good secondary site to hit, secondary distance to hit a lot of what we wanted to hit. Really, the 4 hour race is going to hit pretty much the highlights of the 9 hour race. It's just not going to have all the a lot of the extent of the mileage around it. And so that was part of it. The other part of it is it's a bit of an homage to my own upbringing in adventure racing a decade ago, which was through Swamp Donkey Adventure Race up in Canada, which is Falcon Lake, Manitoba. They do a 9 hour race. That's been their bread and butter for forever. And I came into the sport at that distance. I love that distance. I love the get up in the morning, have a full day of morning and afternoon of getting out there and having an adventure, and then having supper around and then sitting around the campfire into the evening. I love that kind of mentality, and I think it's pretty accessible to folks who are coming from not knowing much about adventure racing, which frankly is pretty much most of Iowa. So that's probably the reason.
Well, that's a spot on decision on your part, right? You're working inside of a region in which adventure racing is not really as well known in other parts of the country, right? So you've worked hard to make it accessible to newer adventure racers by not scaring them off by the distances, but then also saying at the end of the day, guess what? No matter what happens, you cross the finish line, we'll be hanging out. And in my opinion, my favorite part of the day is the day in which the race is over and we're all standing around with our maps in our hands, probably with a burger, something to drink, chatting about the day that everybody had. That's the real glue that kind of binds the community together. So it sounds like that you're recreating a dynamic that served you well when you were a newer adventure racer.
Yeah, for sure. That was John Ford, Rick Shaw, Alex Mann and company up at Swamp Donkey in Falcon Lake, Manitoba. I loved that you could come in and have this great race experience, fantastic course every year. And then we would just hang around and drink a beer with friends afterwards. And we were usually the only Americans up there, so it was often like this is our Canadian pals we'd see once a year, and we just love to go up and do it. And that was just an awesome environment. It was community. It was community first and foremost, and that's really part of what we're trying to build here with Wild Driftless is there's an opportunity for this kind of community in this part of Iowa. There's people looking for new adventures all the time. This is an adventure-rich kind of part of the state, and so we think we can really fill that need for some people. And we'll get my experience at Swamp Donkey. Hopefully, people in Iowa have a similar experience with our race.
You see it time and time again, right? You have racers that have great experiences with races. They enjoy themselves. They grow up in the sport. And then eventually you transition into the idea, like, I really enjoyed the racing and the racing is great. But you know something? I live in this area. I know there's maps for this area. There's different terrain. And I'm going to put an event on myself in this area and kind of recreate that dynamic in a new location. It sounds like you're doing that. Now, with Iowa being Iowa and the fact that this is new, there's a pretty good shot that this podcast may be spread to people who've never raced before, who may want to put their toe in the water. As a race director and an organizer, do you have any plans to help support the newer racers? Will you talk with them beforehand? Will there be anything with maps and compasses? Like, what will you do to help ease the transition into the sport at the race?
Yeah, so ever since I moved to Iowa, as I said, just over 3 years ago, I was I thought I saw the potential for this for adventure racing and thought, man, somebody should be doing a race out here. And increasingly, I realized it probably should be me since no one else was asking about it.
You're looking around, you're like, wait a minute, who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it? Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But from the get-go, I really I was reticent to do it unless I found other people. I mean, I wasn't going to do it on my own like that. I could drag my staff here at Iwalu in kicking and screaming into this process, and like they would certainly help. But I needed some people who were really into adventure racing or who knew the sport. And so it took a couple of years before I finally got introduced to a former guest of yours on this podcast. That'd be Jamie Borglum, who is at Crawdaddy Outdoors in Waverly, Iowa. And just so happened that we had a mutual camp acquaintance who said, hey, you need to go talk to this guy. He's into adventure racing. And I said, he lives in Waverly. So I picked up the phone and gave him a call, and we were chatted for a while. And I came into the shop later and was chatting with him some more about adventure racing. I said, hey, I've always had this idea we should do a race out here. And he said, well, I've had that idea too, and I don't have the time for it, but I will certainly support you. And part of that support is really giving a strong opportunity for people to do classes and to learn through Crawdaddy, which does that work already. They do a lot of outdoor trips, but they also do informational classes, kind of teaching navigation, that kind of thing is very much up their alley. And so we're going to be working together with myself and with Crawdaddy, who is also going to be our lead sponsors. And Jamie is very involved in this race as well. We're going to be doing some things within that area. And they have a pretty great feeder network of people who are really into outdoor sports, who may well probably have never heard of this before. So we are going to be going in kind of saying, here's how to read a map, here's how to the basics of map and compass. And we imagine a lot of those folks are going to be drawn to the 4-hour race. But we're making a 9-hour race course that also could very well be accessible to folks who are doing it for the first time.
Safe to assume that both races will cover the 3 major disciplines. We're going to see cycling, we're going to see trekking, and we're going to see water.
Yep. And so the plan for this race is year 1 out of Camp Iwalu. We already have a host location lined up for year 2 within the Driftless part of Iowa that's not public yet. The idea is we're going to hop around here. So I guess what I'd say is generally in the Driftless, you're going to get all 3 of those for sure. The paddling is going to be different year to year. There's some really neat, very fast, flowy, kind of fun riffly. They say class 1 rapids. I would say just riffles, but there's definitely some fun rivers through here. In the first year, we're going to be on a little bit more accessible, more flat kind of water. But it's going to be different every year as far as that's concerned. There's also going to be years where there's going to be opportunities for ropes and that kind of stuff, and there'll be years where there isn't. So it really depends on where we're at. I'm not going to give too much away about the particulars of where we're at this first year, but there's going to be opportunities for all of that, and definitely trekking, biking, and paddling. And I would say with the biking in particular, you're going to get everything. I mean, you're going to get some of the best gravel roads in the world as far as just beautiful vistas and awesome hills. You're going to get single track. You're going to get double track. You're going to get grassy trails. You're going to get rocky, rooty trails. We don't have hundreds of miles of mountain bike trails, but man, what we have kind of spans the whole the whole spectrum of what you do in an adventure race. So even in a 9-hour race, I think you're going to get to see a lot of different kinds of terrain on a bike.
One of the more common barriers to entry for the newer racer is the technical aspect involved with the mountain biking. How technical will that be? Are we looking at a single track, downhill? Will it be walkable, runnable? Like what do you want to say to the newer racer about the type of technical bicycle skills?
Yeah, it's not going to be inaccessible at all. In fact, we've been open with our 4-hour race with our gear list. If you look at it, you don't even need a mountain bike for the. You need a gravel bike though. You cannot. I mean, it's gravel and some like grassy trails and that kind of stuff. For the 9-hour race, definitely a mountain bike. Definitely like have some experience in riding on trails, but there's a couple of places, there's some parts of the mountain bike trails that I can't ride, and I've been, doing adventure racing for quite a while, but it's not like you're doing that miles on end where you're off the bike. It'll be kind of interspersed. It'll be the kind of thing that I think a person who really loves mountain bike will be like, oh, I wish there were miles and miles of that. But it will also be the kind of thing that you can push a bike around and, for 50 or 100 meters and you'll be back on track. So it's pretty accessible. If folks can ride the whole thing, that's great. There's some little bits of steep and challenging things. So I'll say that it shouldn't intimidate anybody. You're not going to see a giant riding on the edge of a giant cliff face or anything like that here. It'll be accessible, but maybe push boundaries for people who've never done too much mountain biking. We do have some mountain bike trails around Iowa, though, Northeast Iowa, though. So there's a little bit of a culture here. So maybe people do know what they're getting into.
I like your strategy of suckering them in year one with light trails. Walk year 2, put them up on the cliff face. That's an excellent race director strategy to bring them into the fold. And so your point being there is that there will be moments during the race where with the exception of some cyclists, some mountain bikers, everybody's going to have to get off the bike and push the bike a little bit. Very common expectation during a race. What about boats? Will they need to bring their own boats? What are you doing there for watercraft?
No, we're providing. We'll have canoes for teams of 2 to 4, and we are allowing soloists, and we'll have kayaks for them. So we will be providing those. And if folks want to bring their own paddles or PFDs, they can certainly do that. But otherwise, we'll also provide those as well. So
it sounds like you've been very thoughtful about prepping this for the newer racer. What about the seasoned adventure racer? I mean, there may be people out there who have experience, people who've been out there, who've done the bigger races. What's your selling point to the 9-hour race? Or is this primarily geared for the beginners?
No, it's definitely. So I got a call a couple weeks ago, and so this is back in January by the time this podcast comes out. But I heard from Tim Buchholz, who's the director of the Wisconsin Adventure Racing Series, that we're going to be part of the Adventure Racing Series. And as part of that conversation, he mentioned, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're going to come out and do your race." And I was like, "Well, that's great, that's awesome." And then we hung up the phone, and immediately afterwards, I'm like, "Well, this would better be a race that's fun for an advanced team at this point." I was like, we have definitely been thinking about, as we've been building a course, putting ourselves in the shoes of here's the top level team, here's the bottom level team, here's the absolute novice team, and then trying to build a course that is for all of them. I haven't mentioned, but I have some experience in a real small adventure race up in northern Minnesota that got me into the sport. And that was designing a 3-hour course. And we had the spectrum of people who were real athletes to people who were absolute beginners. And I think that was a great course design crash course for me, and how to have no lost area within a race course. Everything needs to be useful. Everything needs to contribute to the whole experience. Yeah, you're going to have some extra distance here or there for folks, but not just adding extra distance to add extra distance. That's something we've been really cognizant of in building this course. So with that in mind, we have a Rib Mountain team. We'll probably have some others coming out. Well, now I put Tim on the spot and said it on your podcast, and now they really have to come out. But it's possible we'll have some other, there's some strong Midwestern teams who could show up, and we are building a course with them in mind as well. Something that is, if not, that may well be clearable for them. I like a course that's clearable by the top end of teams, but at the same time, I don't want, if it's a 9-hour course, I don't want them finishing in 5 hours. Like, it needs to be, they need to have a good experience out there as well. So I think we have it all in mind. I have a couple of awesome betters, including Jamie Borglum and also John Van Dies, who's from Unplugged Adventures, and he's the last Iowa race director. Did some races here in the 2010s. Both of them are going to be helping to make sure that I make the race course both not too long and not too short. So.
Well, that's a fair point to make, right? So you have Tim and Anna coming out, right? And they're strong, and I've had a chance to race with them, and great people to come and do the race, and huge in the Wisconsin scene. Been guests on the Dark Zone, such wonderful ambassadors for the sport in the Midwest. And to clarify, the checkpoints will be a combination of optional and mandatory, any mandatory, all optional. How are you going to put the map together?
All going to be optional. All of the transition areas required. All of the checkpoints will be optional. There's going to be some wrinkles within that. There'll be some things that I've been thinking up for quite a while, and that Jamie and I have been tossing around as some ideas that neither of us have seen actually done in an adventure race before. But within that, there's not going to be anything, no required checkpoints. So it's a very finishable course. So if you could have a team that comes in and just wants to walk all day, to really take their time, and they'll have no problem getting to all the transition areas in the finish line. It's just how much can you add on as far as the other the optional checkpoints.
And that appears to be the strategy used by a lot of race directors who are, they're bringing a shorter race on for beginners, and they're newer, is that those race directors tend to overload the course with checkpoints because all the checkpoints are optional. And then you say to the racers, choose your own adventure, right? Do this part, do that part, go here, go there. And so for the person at home who's thinking about coming and doing the race, it's safe to point out that the bar that they have to jump over to qualify as a finisher is all the TAs are mandatory, all the checkpoints are optional. You hit those TAs, you make it to the finish line. Congratulations, you finished the Wild Driftless.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, I'm sort of very much taking my impetus for how to set a course from Swamp Donkey. They actually set very few checkpoints up there generally, relative to how most 9-hour courses are, but their checkpoints are so far out that, like, it's often not possible to clear, or just on the boundary of being clearable. I take it as a personal challenge as a race director to set a course that's maybe just clearable. And I guess maybe for someone of my ability, which isn't the top end, like I guess I am sort of setting a course with myself in mind first. And like someone like me who's, I'm a decent adventure racer, but like I say that, and I would never say that in the presence of real adventure racers, really. So they're several tiers above me.
We already addressed the imposter syndrome. You can't thought Frank, that's over. You can't do that anymore. So walk us through. So what we do is as racers, race directors, and as we recreate our experiences. And you've talked about the work with Swamp Donkey and John, and you would go to Canada and see your friends up there. Now you're building it here. So look back at the end of the race when all said and done, all the racers are in safe and sound, and you're at the post race party. What do you want people to say about the race? How do you want them to describe it?
Yeah, I would love if everybody from the first finishers to the last finishers felt like they had a great course that was for them, that felt like maybe it was designed specifically for them, and hopefully that everybody across the spectrum feels that way. One of the things that I had sort of set as I was kind of setting a course is looking at the highlights of if these are the top 5 highlights on this course, how can we make sure that the 4-hour version gets 3 of those highlights? How can we make sure that the team that is at the back of the field gets 3 of those highlights, so that, a few of those really great experiences, whether it's a great overlook, whether it's a really fantastic special task, or whether it's just kind of a beautiful section of the course that everybody has to go on anyway. How do we make sure that that's something that everybody gets to experience? And then on the other side, how do we make sure that those top teams, that furthest out checkpoint is worth it? That it feels like something that's like not just like, oh man, that was hard for hard's sake, but that it was actually like hard for hard's sake plus like something that was really worthwhile and neat, and that they feel like, man, I got to see that and no one else did. So I think that's the kind of thing we're looking for, and also just a supportive atmosphere. The other thing that I would love if people felt at the end of the day is, man, this race had the best volunteers. They had people all over the place cheering us on. We are really trying to build a fantastic volunteer experience as well. Jamie's spouse, Renee, is our volunteer coordinator, and she has a pretty extensive adventure race volunteer background. And we're really talking through what that experience is for them. So we're hopeful that, whether people see it or not, they realize at the end of the day, wow, there were a lot of folks out here doing good work. And then hopefully those volunteers also feel like they have a great finish line experience with them.
Well, that's where, too, I always put a plug in during the Dark Zone for people who are curious, right? There are people who are endurance athletes who were a little thrown off by the seeming complexity of adventure racing. And we know that when you get into it, it's really not that complex, but it feels big if you're a marathoner, 5Ks, bike racer. There's a lot of moving parts of adventure racing, which makes it hard. And I always encourage people to go volunteer at a race, go work at TA, registration table, maybe even go clear the course a bit if you want to work on your navigation skills. If people want to get involved in the race, if they want to volunteer, do those opportunities still exist? And who can they reach out to for that? You mentioned Jamie's wife, but I wanted to circle back on that. Who's the best point of contact if they want to volunteer?
Yeah, actually, if you go to our website, wilddriftless.com, one of our links at the top, one of the main ones is volunteering, and you can click on it and you can shoot me an email and I'll connect you with Renee, and we'll make it work. We'll take as many volunteers as want to come out. We're happy to have more people around. And one of the perks actually is that we have a lodge here set aside just for volunteers. So if folks want to stay on site with us, that's an opportunity, and they don't need to just bring the campground or camper or bring the tent. They could actually maybe even sleep indoors. So that's the opportunity there. So yeah, we'd love to have people.
Be careful. Don't spoil them too much.
Yeah, I know.
Sleep indoors. What are you going to feed them next? Yeah, that's crazy talk. So
one of the things we talked about doing that we thought would be really neat too, and this is at the risk of sharing super secret things. It's not that secret. Is that we thought it'd be really cool to get the volunteers who could make it the night before and have a little route reveal and like talk through what they're doing in that sense. So one of the things that I found a lot of times is that volunteers come out and they get stationed somewhere along a race course, and they don't really know the course and they don't really know what's going on. They just know where they're at and what they're supposed to do. And they don't need to know, but man, is it kind of nice to have a picture, the whole picture in mind, and be like, yeah, okay, you don't need to tell anybody about anything else. You just need to know where you're at. But oh yeah, I know I'm this far in the race, and this is what they'll already have done when they got to this point. Would be kind of fun, I think, for volunteers.
Well, you touch on an important part of the race and the racing community, right? What makes adventure racing, I'm not going to use the word, I want to say unique, but other sports have this also, but the sense of community inside adventure racing, right? If you listen to our conversation so far, and you mentioned going to Canada and seeing John, and you mentioned what you're doing in Iowa and talking to Jamie, it's the fact that for a lot of people involved in adventure racing, there's the sport itself, right? There's the map, there's the compass, there's that part of it. But also inside the context of what we do here, they like the people they're with, and they want to cement those relationships through shared experiences, whether it be through a team, a volunteer experience, or a race director experience. And I credit you as you talk about that, of bringing the volunteers together and then giving them a taste of the race beforehand, so they feel like they're a part of something bigger, right? They're not just doing it they're not by themselves, but rather they're putting this community together. And I think that that's a thing worth focusing on and talking a bit about, is that adventure racing, it gives human beings a chance to be a part of something bigger than what they do in their day-to-day life. And I asked this question, I bring that point up too, because you follow that standard trajectory of getting into AR, doing races, and then making races. So let's run the clock back a little bit. How did you get into adventure racing? What was your first race?
Yeah, so actually, I have a very weird chronology at the beginning of my adventure racing career. So this was 10 years ago. This would be 2015. I was a Lutheran pastor in extreme northwestern Minnesota in the Red River Valley, about the flattest place you can find just about anywhere, and the least likely adventure race place in the world. And I was visiting with some colleagues. We were having a meeting about how we could raise some money for youth trips or whatever, the standard kind of thing. And she said, you know what we should do is you should run a triathlon here. You should organize a triathlon in the state park in the extreme northwestern Minnesota. And she knew I did triathlons. And I mean, when I say did triathlons, like I did sprint triathlons here and there, and like maybe the occasional Olympic triathlon. Like I was not that into it. But I looked at the state park and I very quickly said, there's no way. I'm not doing a triathlon. We're in the middle of nowhere. This lake is brown. It's like, it's at blue algae in the summer. It's like, no, this is the worst idea ever. But I started to look at that state park and I said, well, not swimming, but maybe canoeing would be kind of fun out there. And they've got these great trails. And I was very much into triathlon. So I'd been riding only on roads, and I don't think I'd ever mountain biked before, maybe once or twice. And so it's like, oh, this would be kind of fun to get out on the bike out here. And then, yeah, there's some cool places to explore. And there'd be some challenges we could do with some of the history here. And I sort of had this amazing race thing. And I basically like created the concept of adventure racing, looking at this park, and then went to Google and discovered that this was already a sport. And so that was kind of a fun That was like, a fun
I have
thing.
$1 million idea. No one else has ever thought of this.
No one else has. Yeah, so I don't have the experience of like growing up with Eco Challenge or anything like that. That's a little before my time. Like I don't remember watching that on TV. But So I had this idea. It came around, and so when I found out it was a sport, I said, well, that's what we're doing. We're going to create an adventure race here, and it became the Lake Brunson Adventure Race, and it was a 3-hour race. We did it for 5 years, all locals. It was between 9 teams and 20 teams, so maybe as much as like 50 participants, small scale. So I created this race, and then at the same time I thought, well, I should probably look into like doing one of these races, figure out where the one are. And I just like, there's no way there was going to be one near me. There was no way. We were so far in the middle of nowhere. And so it was like the hugest surprise when at some point in searching around for adventure racing, this Swamp Donkey Adventure Race, Falcon Lake, Manitoba, that was 2.5 hours from my front door. Like it was just incredibly close. And so, so in 2015, as I say we, this was just me, like that. The smallest team of volunteers.
I like how you say that 2.5 hours is incredibly close.
Yeah, incredibly close.
Like, around here where I live in Jersey, 15 minutes. Incredibly, 2.5 hours. That's a commitment. But hey, you're out there. All right. So
I would drive 2.5 hours to do a triathlon. I certainly was going to do it to do an adventure race, but and I'd cross a national border too. But that's its own thing. So in 2015, I knew about this race, but I didn't get a team together. I tried a little bit, but honestly, the idea of 9 hours for me, coming from the world of triathlon and like even Olympic triathlons, it's like those are done in under 3 hours. Like I was done. I'm not. So like 9 hours seems so intimidating. It really, really did. And so I started to get a team together. So in 2016. I did our first Lake Brunson Adventure Race in the spring, and then I got a team together and did Swamp Donkey in the fall. And man, I fell in love with that. That was just such a great experience. It was a crazy course. It was an awesome year. It was their 10th anniversary, I think, and maybe the short of the birth of my children and wedding days kind of thing, really one of the most formative days of my life. Really loved what they did.
So say more about that, because that's if you think about it, right? Clearly, a box was checked internally, right? You had this experience, and comparing it to like your wedding, the birth of your kids. It's up there. It's on the podium of life experiences. What happened during that race to make it like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, all the things that typically in an adventure race are really meaningful, working together as a team and all that kind of stuff was a big part of this. That year they got 4.5 inches of rain the day before the race, dropping off bikes in this torrential downpour out there. And, it was we started a remote start way off in the middle of the forest. And I was navigator because I was the one who could use a compass on our team, and we started on this
what's that thing called? It's called the compass. Okay,
yeah,
you're
right.
in charge.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It turned out I was pretty good at it naturally, which was great because we could have gotten real lost. So they had a great trek leg that was mostly off trail, and it took us maybe 2.5 hours or so, and then we get to our bikes, and the first part of the bike was you had to cross over this tiny creek below what's called McGillivray Falls, and then there was this part of this rocky mountain bike section called the Blue Highway, and the creek was not a creek anymore. It was a raging torrent. There was no bridge anymore. The bridge had washed out overnight. And so we started the bike leg by carrying bikes through an absolutely raging torrent of a river. I think they had ropes or something. I don't remember too well. I just remember being in the river and being like, what are we doing? Like, this was unbelievable. And then we got on this just incredible, rocky, it wasn't single tracks, just open rock face bike riding. And we were on that for a little while. And then we had to carry our bikes down the hill and go through a swamp, which was very swamp donkey. That's aptly named. But that swamp was full of so much water at this point that we were the bikes were underwater. I mean, it was just incredible. And then we got to the road, and the road is gumbo. And so that 15-mile bike section took us 3 hours, and we were in the top quarter of teams on that bike section. And then, the rest of the race, paddling, biking, all that stuff. But that single bike leg is so memorable and so etched into my brain. And we came back out of that experience going what did we just do? And can we do it again? We want to do that again. And somehow, definitely not what they designed. That course would have been completely different if it were dry, but it was such a memorable experience. And of the two teammates, Swamp Donkey requires three team members. So of the two teammates I did it with, one of them, Tyler, who lived up near me in northern Minnesota, he and I did every race every year after that. That was for the next several years while I lived up there. We did every Swamp Donkey we could. That was the beginning.
Yeah, adventure racing in conversation and discussion, really, in my notes I wrote down the word primal, big word to use, but the idea that there is, for many of us, many people, there's a deep human need to meet challenge and to address challenge and to overcome challenge, right? Whatever that looks like here. And from time to time, there are experiences that you had that first big bike leg. You tend to find that a lot of people that we have these relatively comfortable lives that we have, right? Everything is kind of weighted. The car starts, the lights turn on in the house, the water flows, and then we inject ourselves into these situations that try us and they test us. And for many men and women, there is the idea that it checks off an internal box to themselves that this was really, really hard, and I was able to do it. I had this grand adventure, and therefore you kind of go back to the well. Am I capturing your experience there?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've seen that for myself. This is something that to have this within a day, to have this experience on a regular basis, it's something that I do crave to go back to. I do think that, I listen to your podcast all the time, and you have folks who are doing expedition races on all the time. And I can see that what they're craving this in this kind of macro way. But I think this is just available to us in a shorter format as well. And it's maybe accessible to different folks. So one of the things I hear from people all the time, are you going to go and do longer races? Well, maybe. I have 3 young kids right now, so it's kind of hard to justify taking the time. But my experience has been between the 9 and 18 hour race range that I've mostly done. It's like I get that experience there. I could see the joy of doing it for a longer period of time, but just get out and do something, and I love that we can show that off and get that experience for people. I'm hoping that Wild Driftless is that for a lot of people, and maybe it's a box they didn't even know they needed to check until they check it.
Yeah, and you're right about that. The idea that somehow a longer distance race is a better experience is a fallacy, right? There are people who do 4, 9, 12, 18-hour races who have the same transformative experiences that you're talking about. What makes the bigger races that as human beings, we tend to level up, right? I always joke about like where this all started. So I ran a 5K 22 years ago. Right. And here you are now, and then we're talking about 5-day, 7-day, 8-day, 9-day, 10-day races. Right. So you kind of grow into it. But I do agree with you that it's a mistake to think that the races of a shorter distance are somehow less of an experience for racers. That's completely a myth. And as I've said before we started recording, I'll say it again now, is that the dark zone tilts towards those bigger events because they're big and they're loud and they're story generators. But I agree with you that inside of a 4, 9, 18, 24-hour race, completely that experience does exist, which was your experience there, which keeps you coming back to the race time and time again. And so I guess the message, if I hear you correctly, is that part of your motivation for putting on the Wild Driftless, it's not so much to be known as a race director. You've checked off that box, but something happens inside adventure racing that you want to give to other people.
Yeah. And I would love for it to spur a community, to create a community around it and something more local to this area as well. And I think that's the bridge that can make a short race into a longer experience, is that people come and have this experience, but then they also see each other at the local mountain bike trails, or they have this experience that then can impact the rest of their year. So it's not just that experience. And so, I'd say that my desire in creating a race really is community oriented, and it is also the local community too. I want to bring something to people here in I'm in Clayton County, but it's really this whole Driftless area of Clayton County, Fayette County, Winneshiek, McKee County. There's this whole northeastern part of Iowa. Part of this is selfish for me. This has been a great entry foot in the door with a lot of organizations that are conservation oriented that I've never worked with before. And my work as an executive director of a camp is that it's sort of very similar to their world, but it's always been a little bit apart from it. But adventure racing has really helped bridge. And so whether it's with our local recreation corridor people or our local conservation people, this has been just fantastic to come to them and say, hey, not only, hey, I'm the director of this camp, but actually I've got this cool event coming up. Do you want to be part of it? And every one of them has gotten pretty excited about bringing a new event to the area, and also a new event that isn't just going to be here 1 year, but is going to be, moving around and in the region, hopefully for quite a while.
You mentioned before that you had a former role inside an organized religion. You mentioned that you were Lutheran. As you think about your experience there, is that part of your life and your adventure racing experience, where do those two circles kind of overlap? Or do they run in parallel, or are there things that you find in both experiences that match each other?
Well, one of the places they sort of overlap is this. I'm at a camp that's a Lutheran summer camp. Although when I say that, I don't want to give the impression this is open to anybody. It really is. But like this, the intersection of meaning and community and adventure is something that happens here at camp. And I think that I know there's some other folks in the adventure racing world that, whether they're in Boy Scouts or whether they're in, there's some other camp folks or people who are associated with camps. This is a similar experience to what our, especially like our high school, like high adventure folks that come out and kids who come out and do camp, like they're pushing boundaries, and they're doing it in, for us having that kind of faith-centered part of it is part of it. I think that every adventure race experience is some kind of, whether people view it as kind of a metaphysical kind of thing or a faith-centered thing. really what it's doing is it's tearing a bit of yourself and getting you out of the center of your own life and showing you the world around you. And all the better you're doing it with other people, because you need people, you need community to tell you when you're crazy. And adventure racing does that. Like, it also is ruthlessly objective. I mean, you can't make that flag be in that control be where you want it to be. It's going to be where it's going to be. And I think that's something powerful in that, is that we spend a lot of our lives telling a story about how we are. And adventure racing, we just get to be. Like, we're going to just go out and have an experience on the day, and we don't get to, we'll tell the story afterwards, but we can't like convince ourselves that we're a great adventure racer if we're going to be, going out and getting ourselves lost all day. It just is what it is. And that's personal growth that happens through that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's an experience that we all have as adventure racers, where when you get to the start of the race, right? And because of the isolating nature of the race. And what I mean by that is that an adventure race is a self-contained community that comes together for a little while. There's a shared experience, and then we go back to our own separate life experiences. When the phone is turned off, when there's no access to the outside world, it's you, it's your teammate, it's the maps, it's the course, and it's time. That creates a hyper-local, hyper-fixated experience that becomes a memory generator. It becomes a test of one's capacity, but then also it lets you be more than just by yourself, right? I have found that I'm a far better person overall when I realize that my teammates are depending upon me to be there for them, and vice versa. They're the same exact way. I think what you're saying is that through your camp experiences and bringing the high schools together with the high adventure, that adventure racing to you is a replication of that dynamic. It doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah. I'd say that, like you said, being fully present, it is, it's so hard for adults, but especially hard for young people right now to be fully present. They're always just waiting for the next ding on their phone. And adventure racing, I mean, everybody sort of knows this, but we're also sort of slaves to it. But adventure racing, your phone's off. And not only is your phone off, you're lost in the woods somewhere. I just think people are craving that, and they don't necessarily know why they're craving it. And certainly there's plenty of folks who also are very fearful of it. But I think that more often than not, when you get out and you experience it once or twice, for a lot of people, it's really meaningful to be able to just, and like you said, doing it with a team is so vital, because then it isn't just you going out and having your own kind of mountaintop experience. It's something you can share with other people and also struggle with other people. I tell you, the biggest, the worst experience and the most formative experience I've ever had in adventure racing was at the same time at Swamp Donkey in 2019. We were almost going to win the race. I mean, we were second place, I think, coming out of this. We'd just been doing so well. And we had this mountain bike leg where we got so turned around, and I had nobody to blame but myself. I was navigating. I just got us completely lost. And we went from second place to timing out and ended up out overtime. And over there, it's just unranked. Just unranked at that point. Yeah, I know. The heartbreak of it. I'm glad now, 5 years later, 6 years later, that I had that experience. But in the moment, it was like, this is the worst thing ever. I can't believe we just did that. But that ruthless objectivity, and nobody was there to pat us on the back. They say, "Oh, you finished, but you finished over time. So sorry," And I think that what came out of that was an awareness of how to set goals, of all the things we weren't doing, all the communication pieces that just weren't there, developed because we all looked at one another and said, we never want that to happen again. And I think that's just, that's something that adventure racing does. It's like a lot of sports say they're really strategic, or you've heard the chess analogy with every sport. It's it's a chess game out there. I mean, adventure racing sort of is. I say this, I'm a chess master also. So it is something. There's some strategy. There's some real strategy, and there's, but more than that, there's real actual a lot of things to balance at the same time. And I think that's something that is. It's really great. I haven't seen replicated in other sports, not in the same way.
I agree with that. I think that all the inbound data you have to put together along the way creates a unique experience. My heart goes out to you, by the way. Second place, and then all of a sudden things kind of disintegrate. Next thing you know, you're off. That happened at Mark Harris's Shenandoah Epic. We were by no means were we anywhere near the top, but we're having a great race until we weren't, and we came in like 47 minutes after the race ended, and we got the head shake of shame, and it was a brutal experience, and you learn from it. You know, you were talking earlier.
There was one checkpoint. We could have skipped the one checkpoint and we would have finished second place. There was only one team that cleared the course that year. We were way ahead of any other team and we've spent, I don't know, an hour looking for one checkpoint and ended up 15 minutes over time. It's like, you know, I think a lot of people have a story like that. And you learn from it.
Right. And you grow and hopefully you don't eat each other alive too much. And it's the team rolls on. But, you know, I know we're doing a podcast. When you're telling that story, if my face was on video, I was agonizing with you because I know that feeling of leaving it on the course and blowing the navigation near the end. You know, you and before you were talking, I flashed to the phrase that's used by Chris Kalous for the Enormal Cast, which is a climbing podcast, which is a great listen, by the way. You don't have to be a climber to enjoy it. And Chris Kalous talks about when they go climbing together, they develop war stories without the war, that there's a shared common experience and that binds people together. And there are people I've raced with that when I see them, we catch up at races, there's joy in seeing them because we have that shared experience of a big race that we had a really good time together. Another thing that I thought about too, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, is Sebastian Junger wrote a book called Freedom. And the idea you talked a bit about the phone dinging and the society kind of chewing at us. And in Freedom, Sebastian Junger and several veterans, they walked across the Pennsylvania rail lines. And I'm giving a really high overview part of it. But when they were doing this walk, when they would come across people who weren't walking with them, they would tell them what they were doing, that they were leaving everything behind and they were on this journey together. And often people would say to them, "Can I join you? Can I come with you?" Right? There's the innate experience, a desire for new experiences, a desire to be tested, to try things out. And it sounds to me that adventure racing very early on checked off that box for you, and you're doing your best to bring that to the rest of the world.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. Well, I couldn't find that in triathlon, you know, and that's there's nothing against anything like that. But I found that the athletic side, that kind of thing was fed by other sports. But there's something about adventure racing that was so much, I don't know, more holistic. It just had, I hit the whole picture. And the fact that you could do it with other people and really do it with other people was really, really neat. And I say this now, and like last year, 3 out of the 4 races I did solo. So but it was not necessarily by choice. I think that I prefer to be with people just because of that, like the depth of the experience and being able to share it with them is just awesome.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of The Dark Zone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Thank you to Frank for sharing his love of the sport and his desire to grow as a racer and race director. He was great fun, and I hope everybody here has a chance to consider the Wild Driftless Adventure Race. Keep racing, keep training, we'll keep talking. All the best.